Graders and seventh graders. I have a couple seventh graders taking algebra this year. Good to have you listening again. And we're in section 2.7 and we're going to do example 3. I know you guys just hate it when we do word problems, but you know, we need the exposure. Our goal is to get ready for our state test, and we need exposure to all different kinds of problems. Everybody knows that on this planet you guys are so good at crunching numbers, but sometimes we got to interpret it from situations and be able to apply it to situations. So this is one example where we can actually apply absolute value to a specific situation. We've seen this kind of application when we did absolute value equations. Now we're going to do absolute value inequalities. Now here's the situation. Some fire extinguishers contain pressurized water. The water pressure should be 162.5 psi, which is pounds per square inch. But it is acceptable for the pressure to differ from this value by at most 12.5 psi. Write and solve an absolute value inequality to find the range of acceptable pressures. And then we need to graph the solution. Okay, now my first question to you is, are there 2 words in the second sentence that tell you this has to be an inequality? Now I hope the answer is yes, and that you have circled at most. Okay? At most indicates an inequality. We've worked with these words before. At least, at most, less than, greater than. We've worked with all of these words. At most means it cannot be more than 12.5 psi difference, either direction. Okay? At most means less than or equal to. So go ahead and write that down in your notes. At most means less than or equal to. Okay? So when we do these absolute value inequalities, and we know it's absolute value because if you can go 12.5 below 162.5 and 12.5 above 162.5 and create this range, this difference, that's an absolute value. That would be an absolute value in an equation if they used an equal, a word that meant equals, or absolute value inequality when they use things like at most. Okay? So here's how you get it started. We know it's an absolute value, so we're going to create our absolute value lines, and we're always going to write x minus. I told you that when we did absolute value equations. The way you get those started is you put x minus. Now, what you put beside the minus sign is what the measurement should be. It was designed to hold what pressure? 162.5. Okay? And that was given in the problem. And they said that range can differ, that amount can differ at most, there's your less than or equal to 12.5. So that's what they're saying. We can be 12.5 more than 162.5, and it can be 12.5 below 162.5. That's what they're saying. That's absolute value, believe it or not. So we're going to follow our steps. Step 1, get the absolute value alone, and it is. Step 2, assess the inequality symbol. It's less than, so that less than or equal to, so that means it's an and. And then step 3, we're going to write and solve 2 inequalities. So here's the first one. You're going to write what you see. And then the second one, we're going to do it again, but this time we're going to flip the symbol and change the sign. Awesome. Beautiful. All right, so now we're going to solve. So we're going to add 162.5 to each side. This might be a good time to whip out your calculators if you don't already have those with you. Go ahead and grab that. 162.5 plus 12.5, and you have 175, and I'm going to drop down that word and I'm going to do it again, add 162.5 to each side. and we're going to do negative 12.5 plus 162.5. So it looks like our range, it can be as low as 150 and as high as 175. So when you graph this out, let's just do it like this. We'll do 150, 175. We'll just put our two numbers there. We know it can be 175 or less, and we know it can be 150 or greater. And there's your overlap, so your answer lies between and includes 150 and 175. So we wrote an absolute value inequality, we solved it, and we graphed it. That's our goal for this work problem, is to recognize it for what it is. All right, now as you flip the page, there's another one. I'm going to leave that one for you to try. Your code word for this lesson is falling leaves. Falling leaves. And I'm going to leave this one as extra credit for you to try. So I need you to do three things for me. Write, solve, and graph an absolute value inequality. Good luck with that, and thanks for listening.